The Centre presents a new podcast, CBME and You, a podcast devoted to promoting awareness and debate around controversial ethical issues in biomedicine.
Welcome back to CB Me and You, a podcast about biomedical ethics.
What? I'm sorry. What?
Do you want me to do that again?
Yeah, no, please continue, my bad.
Today, we discuss the philosophy of Daoism and its implications for medicine and the doctor-patient relationship. What key lessons can we learn from Daoism? How is this ancient philosophy relevant to us today? And what's all this stuff about butterflies anyway?
And what accent is James really doing?
Joining us, it's like old-timey radio guy. Joining us is our very own Dr. Alexa Nord-Bronzyk, Research Fellow at the NUS Center for Biomedical Ethics.
Wow, wow, wow.
Welcome, Alexa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Honestly, James, you've set it up so high. Unless the rest of us...
Are we supposed to match that?
If you can, match it however you like. No, you don't have to.
Okay, I got it.
Please.
Yep.
That's your special skill.
Yeah,
Yes.
old-timey radio man.
Okay, I like that each time we do an episode, you have a new voice. But please, Alexa, welcome.
Thank
this
you.
is about you, not
Oh,
James's,
wow.
improv
It is
skills.
an honor to be here.
So our first three questions for you are coffee or copy?
Coffee,
Really?
like in a serious way.
I love how every time someone answers that question, I'm surprised. Please tell me.
Yeah, I was like, what,
Yeah.
is that so crazy?
I don't know. You've just been here for such a long time. I was wondering if you'd adapted your preferences.
In many ways, I have. With coffee, it's non-negotiable for me. I'm a diehard coffee fan. Never got into Kopi. I'm not a sweetened condensed milk person, for one. And I know you can have the Kopi. Oh, that's the black coffee, right? But even then, there's something about the brewed coffee that I make in my French press that I'm just wedded to.
You walking past my desk in the morning with your big thing of French press is like part of my day.
Yeah. Oh, that's
It's a
lovely.
ritual.
Well, and I think also I think it was your previous guest, Lucy, who mentioned that Kopi is like a punch in the face. And I was listening to this and I thought, well, she just hasn't had my coffee because it is aggressively a punch in the face. And I love that.
Very competitive all of a sudden. Oh, yeah, I can punch you in the face harder.
Yeah.
Next question. Which country do you want to travel to next the most?
I thought about this and I thought it would just be so much easier if you asked me which country I don't want to travel to next.
Oh.
But if I have to answer the question, I have to tweak it a little bit to say which part of a country do I want to travel to next?
All right.
Because I have been to China in several places, but one place that I'm dying to go to is Chengdu in the Sichuan province. One, because it's my favorite cuisine. I love spicy mala hot pot. I love the pickled fish. And also for the nature. I hear there's beautiful hiking there, so it's on my bucket list.
For those of you who don't know, currently Alexa is our adventure queen in the office. You've been in Singapore for how many years?
Over 11.
Over 11 years. And so Alexa is slowly guiding me through gaining XP or adventure points.
Yes.
So the more things I try in Singapore, the more XP I get and the cooler I objectively become.
Right.
Alexa being my guide.
Yes.
I know you don't usually play games, but do you think XP stands for adventure points?
Yes. What is...
Moving on.
What does XP stand for?
Experience points.
Oh.
Okay, well, come on. It's not so different.
It's close.
Adventure, experience.
They have
I just couldn't
girls.
help myself but get a bit,
Yeah.
get a bit about that.
We'll be beeping that.
Yeah. Oh, we know who the gamers are here.
Excuse me.
Okay, that was the toxic gamer bro in me coming out. Let's move on.
Self-reflection, self-awareness. We're proud of you, James. Last question, our favorite question. And we know that you're a karaoke queen. So what song would you sing at karaoke?
Yeah, so it's just anything Mariah Carey. Big fan. It just depends on my
Wow.
mood.
Yes.
So maybe like if I'm feeling like a love ballad, it's Without You. And then if I want to be inspirational, it's Hero. And then if I want to be like fun and flirty, it's Fantasy.
Wow, I love this.
What a range. And do you
Yeah.
actually hit the notes?
Nope.
And neither are you expected to.
8 octaves, man. That's
She
some
has
serious
an 8
talent.
octave range.
Unbelievable.
Are you serious? I barely have one.
Yeah, I have like 1.5.
Okay, serious stuff.
All right.
New voice.
Yeah.
In exactly 50 words or less. Can you give us a summary of the entire philosophy of Taoism?
I'd like to challenge your 50-word request with a 3-word reply, which is harmony with Tao.
Damn it.
Essentially, that is what Taoism is as a philosophy, but then there's a lot to unpack with that, right? So there's a difference between philosophical Taoism and religious Taoism. And philosophical Taoism is usually thought of, I'm going way beyond your 50 now, but I'm just giving you some context.
Those 3 words, harmony with that, honestly, I felt chills. I felt boom.
Deep in my soul.
Yeah, I felt like gave you a challenge and you just like went like, challenge accepted.
Not just
And you
challenge
just went, bam,
accepted,
3
challenge
words. I
crushed.
was like, oh shit.
Yeah. Damn, man. Chills.
Yeah.
Please keep going.
Okay, yes. So philosophical Taoism is usually thought of as the expression of 2 texts, the Lao Tzu and the Zhuangzi. Lao Tzu came before Zhuangzi. Lao Tzu was around 5th, 6th century BCE, and Zhuangzi was around 4th century BCE. And they're thought to mostly comprise of Taoist thought as a philosophical tradition, but there have been other texts that contribute later on, like the Liezi, but mostly when people talk about philosophical Taoism, it's these 2 texts. However, they are quite different. The Lao Tzu is thought to have been written more for the ruler and touches more on things like governance, and it's also more prescriptive. The Zhuangzi, on the other hand, is more literary and playful and focuses a lot on challenging norms. And this idea of living in harmony with Tao is usually emphasized with different concepts like freedom and spontaneity and effortlessness and non-action. And all of these have sort of different interpretations depending on the scholar who's interpreting it. But in general, this idea of spontaneity is through a term called Ziran. And it basically means the spontaneous emergence that happens both metaphysically within the world and within the individual. And then the second most prominent one that people talk about is usually wu wei, which literally means non-action, but it has connotations of purpose, not necessarily purposeless action, but indirectly achieving actions. And there are lots and lots of other concepts, and it just depends on who's talking about it. Certain people decide to focus on different things, but some other prominent concepts include freedom and self-realization and self-actualization, limitlessness in thought, open-mindedness, how to break down preconceived notions and distinctions, things that we think about to categorize the world, including hierarchies. A lot of people also talk about forgetting and sitting and waiting.
So this is going to be a terrible recap of what you've just said. What you're saying is, and I know this is very wrong for so many reasons, but I'm going ahead anyway.
Ooh, I want to be here for this.
So is Taoism the philosophy that just like roll with the punches?
Well, I think a lot of people read it that way, but I think most Taoist scholars would probably disagree with you and say that there's a lot of nuances to what that means.
Be the punch.
Punch yourself.
It's spontaneous. Didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, I mean there are definitely aspects to Taoism that motivate that kind of behavior, but it doesn't mean that the Taoist sage sits there and does nothing or sits there and waits for things to happen necessarily. There is a level of action that the sage, as they would call it, takes in life, but it's only actions that are in harmony with Tao. And so sometimes that translates as things that are emerging without intention or without purpose.
Is there like a definition of Tao that we can roll with, or is
How do I know if I'm rolling with the punches?
Yeah.
How do I know if I'm in harmony with the Tao? With Tao.
Okay. Well, the complicated part about that is that Tao isn't definable. It is the ineffable. And so there are different ways of thinking about it. But one way I like to think about it, which might sound really funny, is to think about the kind of metaphysical foundation of Tao in the texts. So that starts with Wu, which means nothingness. And the way I think about that in my head is actually like just a big scribble on a piece of paper where you can't really tell where something begins or ends, and it's just kind of all interconnected nothingness. Okay?
Yep.
And then what happens is it turns into the one, E. And so it turns from indistinctness to distinct entities. Things start to form into entities, basically. And then from there, it becomes the many things. And all of these things are a mirroring of Tao. And it is this harmony with like the emergence of things that comes from nothing that is Tao. And I know that probably didn't help at all.
No. my little brain is like imagining my like biomedical drawings of mitosis. You know, when you have the chromosomes that are like an the material that's just a massive mess, and it's just like a big scribble, and then it slowly becomes the X's, and then they replicate and become many more. So that's I got the scribble thing. Excellent.
That's another good one. Yeah, I think it can apply.
I was thinking about a game from Art Attack.
But kind of to answer your question about how do I know when I'm in harmony with Tao, I think sort of the idea is the second you know it, you're probably not in harmony with Tao anymore.
Whoa.
What?
Yeah. So, because this goes back to that concept of Wu Wei, the non-action concept. So it's a way of acting without intention or purpose, such that things are achieved of themselves. And so that means that in order to be in harmony with Tao, once you know it, you're out of it.
Okay, I've got this. I figured it out. So have you seen the movie Inside Out? No, Soul, Disney's Soul. Pixar Soul.
It was a yes and then a no.
No.
Okay, so in that movie, it's all about this little soul that's not in the pre-soul place, and that this little soul doesn't want to go to Earth because they think it sucks. I mean, like, fair point, right? Anyway, there's this thing in there called the flow state, and it's how people on Earth can access like that great before by entering the flow state by doing something. So whether that's playing piano or playing soccer, and they're just so in the zone of what they're doing that they're in their own universe. They're but as soon as you realize you're in the universe, you fall out of it. You're no longer in the flow.
That's very similar, and there's been a lot of literature on flow state and Daoism comparatively, and a lot of people do think that that was sort of what these texts were getting at with Wu Wei and Ziran. But there's also an important distinction. So these skills are usually things that you have to practice for a while in order to get that flow state. Whereas for the type of harmony with Tao where we're talking about, not skills that you build so that they become natural, but that are already natural within you. Yeah.
So Tao is jazz, is what I'm hearing.
Maybe, yeah.
It's spontaneous.
Maybe, yeah.
You go with the flow. You roll with the punches. You wild the
that's
punch.
so good. I like it. Yeah.
you need to scat a little bit in the next presentation.
This would not be the first time you've scattered in a podcast.
Daoism.
I'm glad you came on the pod.
So it does sound like, I kind of get what you're saying, but it does sound a little bit indeterminate as far as ethics goes, because in ethics we're interested in figuring out what's good and what's bad and what's right and what's wrong. But I guess firstly, it doesn't sound like there are any like really clear principles about what's good and what's bad. And on top of that, you said the moment you know, you're not in it. So it's like, okay, if we can't know what it's like, and we can't, and there are no principles,
And there's no definition of how to get there.
and there's no definition of how to get there, is it telling us much at all?
Well, I think I'm going to focus on the Zhuangzi a little bit, because the way that the Zhuangzi is able to convey these messages is often through the use of like parables and allegories. And without, you can kind of call it wordless teaching. So without telling or saying or deeming right and wrong, you're able to kind of get the motivations from the story. And I guess in that way, it's able to give you a sense of what may be behind it all. Because, okay, to be fair, I think even though in general the text does not promote any sort of morality, any sort of right or wrong, good or bad, you get the gist that he probably prizes certain things like spontaneity and freedom and limitlessness in thought, flexibility, adaptability, things like that. So I guess to answer your question, Zhuangzi in particular is not really going to give you prescriptive things that we can use in ethics and, you know, any sort of set of principles, but you can ascertain from reading the text maybe what you could do. But he's just not going to tell you to do it or exactly how.
I get the vibe that it's more descriptive than actively prescriptive.
Yeah.
And in being descriptive, you can learn things.
Yeah. It's very literary and playful, and there are a lot of uses of like metaphors and things, so that it challenges you to think about what they're saying when they're not actually saying it in the text. I mean, some things are much more clear than others. And, you know, there are stories where you're like, oh, I get what that means. And then there are stories that you have a very difficult time figuring out the meaning. But I mean, there are themes that come out that just stand out in the literature. So those are usually what you'd say, if you wanted to like parallel with principles, you'd say those are maybe like the principles of Daoism. But it's just that Daoism wouldn't want you to have principles as such.
So how then is Daoism relevant to medicine?
So I guess just like very macro and broadly, I think any discipline, and medicine is one, can have a valuable addition of perspectives that aren't always there. So I think Taoist perspectives, in traditional Chinese medicine, that's the foundation. But in Western medicine, which is what I think we're talking about, Taoism is not present, right? And so these perspectives sort of offer a new way to orient different issues that might come up in medicine. So maybe one is the doctor-patient relationship. Right now we're working on not another model to the doctor-patient relationship, but a way for the doctor-patient relationship to orient itself in the clinic, where you could use any of the models that already exist. So let's just take like paternalistic, for example. Some people might really like to be kind of told what to do and have the doctor be the authority, and they just do what the doctor says. And with our model, there's more of a holistic approach. So a doctor could still have that sort of modus operandi, if you will, but be able to be more in tune with that particular person. So taking into account maybe the lifestyle of the person, their social life, their work, things that are maybe stressing them, their relationships, and incorporate that into care plans. Because part of the way that could augment the entire situation is that a person is sort of their whole ecosystem of life and experiences. So incorporating that into a care plan really personalizes what that care plan looks like, and it just offers a new perspective for doctors and patients to relate. So yeah, I guess that's sort of the macro reason that I think Taoism is helpful. But then there are particular areas of medicine that I think Taoism can be especially helpful. One of them is in disability narratives. There's a term called structural ableism, which is, you know, the norms and policies and processes that we have in place in the institutions that privilege able-bodied people. and maybe on, another level, just the societal belief that able-bodied people are maybe better, and that disability is a bad thing that should be cured or treated. And I guess because Daoism sort of breaks down these distinctions and doesn't think about things in terms of good or bad, it offers a new way to think about the disability narrative, where maybe people with disabilities don't need to be treated or cured, but rather we can think about treatments or plans that help them to live a higher quality of life. And this also has implications for precision medicine and genetics and genomics, and thinking about how and what sort of gene testing should be promoted and available to people, and how they should interpret these tests. Because maybe for certain prenatal genetic tests, a parent might find out that there's a positive result for some sort of disability, and then maybe change the way that they decide to move forward with the birth. And there's no necessarily right or wrong way to do that. But if we think about the Taoist perspective, especially in the Asian context where these beliefs are kind of embedded in the culture, it gives a new way to think about these areas of medicine.
So that's very interesting. And what I'm going to try to get at is the idea of, is there anything really, really distinctive about Daoism? Not like there has to be, but so many of people who are like invested in these kinds of conversations might point out that there are a lot of movements within medicine to change things in a direction that you're already talking about, right? Like there are people who who are saying that disability not necessarily a bad thing; it's just a different kind of life. And there are people who are saying that doctors and patients, doctors should be more consultative towards the patients, and be more interested in what their patients see as a life worth living, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm wondering if Daoism says, adds something, a distinctive kind of flavor that would be surprising even to these people.
Yeah, I love that question. There are a few things to that. First is, in today's frameworks of medicine and the way people appreciate maybe academic literature in medicine, they might see the word Daoism or hear the word Daoism and instantly kind of be like, oh, that doesn't apply to me, or that's not relevant for medicine. And the interesting thing is, partially, you're right in saying we don't need Daoism to have these ideas. Daoism, which, just give credit where credit's due. I mean, they thought of it first, right? So, no, I mean, I could take my paper on the Taoist perspective on the doctor-patient relationship, and I could remove all the Taoist concept as such and just talk about them descriptively and not reference Taoism. But I know that, a lot of these ideas sprouted from Taoism for me. So I'm talking about it in that context. But you're completely right that a lot of the ideas are already present in literature on medicine today, but in bioethics. But there are certain nuances also to Taoism that I think are important. And I think a lot of it comes down to it comes down to when you actually read the texts and the way that they sort of transform you while reading them. I'm not saying that you have to read the text in order to understand a Taoist perspective to bioethics, but I think that there's a transformative effect. I would also just say that these concepts do have acute definitions that are distinct from the way similar concepts might be described today, just by virtue of being their own concept that was originally created by a certain thinker from 4th, 5th century BCE. The entire context and metaphysical foundation for that thinker imagining that concept is different, which means it's inherently unique in itself. And while there are some discussions on medical nihilism, I'm not actually sure many people, if anyone in modern medicine, is actually talking about spontaneity or allowing actions to emerge of themselves and achieving things indirectly.
It just occurred to me that these people named their texts after themselves.
Well,
this is a retrospective kind of thing.
They didn't really name their own texts. They were kind of named later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, there's a baller move.
But no, the Zhuangzi is the Zhuangzi, but the Lao Tzu is also called the Dao De Jing. So Lao Tzu is the guy, Dao De Jing is the book, but a lot of people just call it the Lao Tzu.
So I'm running this through my brain, and I think a lot of what you're saying sounds really beautiful. And as an able-bodied person, I think this has been really enlightening for me. And so one of the things you're saying is like that the Taoist perspective can come along and say, okay, let's learn to live with this. In my brain, let's roll with the punches. Let's go with the flow. There's nothing to fix. It is just how can we continue to keep moving forward in a flow state. Or I've really latched onto that word, haven't I?
It's jazz, man.
No, I'm not.
Oh,
I'm
we were
not
so
scatting.
close.
But then what about like, treatments for disability? What does this have to say about, should we then not be looking for cures, or do people not want cures if they are available? Or is it like in a medium or like a momentary state of mind until research develops?
I think the Taoist perspective definitely would not reject treatment or even a cure necessarily. It's just, it comes down to the perspective of the patient and how the patient, I'm going to go back to the spontaneous self, the Zuran, how they view themselves as a spontaneous self within the context of Tao, so harmony with Tao. I guess maybe a patient with disability wouldn't want to be cured. Maybe they would. Maybe there are certain interventions that they would be open to because they improve their quality of life. But maybe there would be other interventions that would be imposed upon them because of maybe some belief of the doctor that they need to not have that disability, or maybe impositions from the doctor's belief about what disabilities should be changed. So it really is about listening to the patient and what they feel is important about their quality of life. Many people with disability live very happy lives. Which is well documented. So it's about listening to the individual. And I think many people with disability will want certain treatments to improve their quality of life. And Taoism wouldn't have a problem with that. It's more if the interventions are put on because of imposed societal norms or hierarchies, things that aren't spontaneously natural to them.
Yeah, so what we're looking at with Daoism is not putting the patient onto the societal flow state, but identifying their own and keeping them on that path. That's quite lovely.
Yeah.
And here again, we see that nice little convergence with like the way, I think that the kind of thing that the doctors are moving to, for the most part, where they'll say, hey, here's a treatment. I recommend it, but like go home, talk to your family about it or something.
Yeah.
Talk to your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great to see that we've moved.
Have we?
Towards.
Doctor has never said that to me. Go home and talk about it with your family and friends.
I have to say the same because I keep hearing that this is happening, but I don't experience it, and I don't meet many people that experience it.
I've been to the doctor twice in the last month, and I don't think either of them actually asked, like, how are you? It's just like, why are you here?
Yeah.
What can I do for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Fix my
Theoretically,
problems.
that's what doctors say they're doing.
Okay, so I'm really enjoying this idea, and I think it's quite beautiful. But how can you implement like guidance for health practitioners who don't have time to read these texts and learn these things so that they can then provide care in accordance with these perspectives?
Well, I mean, we have lots of ethical codes for various physicians. I think it's very easy to plop a few things in there from a Taoist perspective.
Be spontaneous. Ask for consent. Don't ask for consent. Decide on the day.
Well, I mean, those things have to be more practical. And I think what I'm getting at more is like a perspective or an orientation. So it's a perspective and an orientation from which actions will follow. But it's not, as we talked about, these actions have to emerge out of themselves. So if we were to put things within guideline, more prescriptive guidelines, it would be sort of, it would be about how the doctor can think about a situation rather than telling the doctor what to do. And so I think that could include things like, well, I mean, my my first instinct is to be prescriptive actually when thinking about it, because that's the way I think most of the codes are written. So I haven't really put much thought into the wording, because, I'm just thinking, would it be ask about their personal life, or would it be more like, how might your treatment plan interact with the person's personal life? I think one good example is there's some literature on the Muslim Malay women with diabetes in Singapore who maybe they might get a treatment plan to have better diet and exercise habits. And this might conflict with their personal life due to cultural norms and just general lifestyle norms that they experience that would prohibit them from having substantial changes in their diet and exercise plans. So I guess the perspective of the doctor kind of has to shift with the patient's lifestyle and think about, how does this care plan fit in with that person's everyday life? Is it something that is achievable? And so I think, this shift has to go from, rather than doctors thinking about the standard of care, the standard procedure and process that they're used to, or the care plan that they would normally just give without thinking, they can incorporate the person's daily life.
So do you think, though, that this might make healthcare kind of relative and in a way that's not?
No, I think it makes it incredibly appropriate to the person.
So, yes, and that's what I mean. So, for example, currently patient comes into the doctor, doctor goes, okay, well, this is like the standard of health of which we expect a human to be. This is how you can achieve that standard of health. Instead, what we're saying is, well, let's look at the person, and according to their social life, their person, their being, who they are, this maybe what they're capable of based on their other priorities is not the classic human standard of health, but something maybe a little bit shorter than that. And in doing that, though, and whilst I think that I haven't thought this through, so help is what I'm saying. Would that mean, though, that we're making healthcare relativistic? Would there be negative consequences of just being like, oh, okay, well, according to your values, which is you really like this really poor lifestyle, and we're not talking about disability here, let's talk about people who just make poor life choices that result in really, really bad health. Okay, well, this is only what you're capable of. Or are you limiting this model more to like disability?
I think it applies really well in disability and chronic illness. But I think, because those are areas where the imperative curative model isn't always applicable. But I think there may be situations where this is especially true when you take into consideration psychological well-being and mental health, because maybe someone doesn't want to take care of themselves. How does a doctor deal with that?
I don't know.
Yeah, right.
You're beyond saving.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
So I think this perspective is definitely more applicable in certain areas than others. But I don't think it's not worth exploring in almost every area of medicine, because it is quite broad, and because it isn't prescriptive, it's kind of easy to apply in various areas of medicine. And yet, to your question again, I think so. There are different views about relativism in the Zhuangzi, but one view is that it's funny because this paper is not about bioethics, but he uses the term patient relativism. But the idea is there's the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would like done unto yourself. And then there's the Confucian negative version, which is do not do unto others as you would not want done unto yourself. And then this author coins Zhuangzi as the bronze rule. which is do unto others as they would want done unto themselves. And so this is his idea of patient relativism, where I guess in the doctor-patient relationship context, this would mean that the doctor shouldn't necessarily impose his standard of care despite it being in the best interest of the patient potentially, or what he believes is, but rather that what the patient believes is best for him or herself is what is best.
So I have a potential objection. So imagine I'm a doctor of the physician variety.
Of what other varieties are there, man?
Of the academic variety, like you are.
My bad. Sorry, it didn't land.
Yeah. So you're telling me all. Imagine I'm a doctor. You're telling me all this, and I just say, look, man, I've got a very specific set of skills. And it's look at something going on with the body and try to fix it. And you're telling me to do all these other things. It sounds like this is just stuff for the patient to figure out with their family or their guidance counselor or their life coach or whatever. I'm specialized. I just want to focus on my thing. And by asking me to do all these other things, you're making my job so much harder. Why don't I just do my part? And if the patient wants more than that, they can look for other people who will do their part.
Yeah. Well, I think you can do both. And I don't think the doctor you're talking about has to do that job necessarily. I think there could be a complementary kind of system where this specialized doctor works with maybe that person's
life coach
or whatever, or maybe like there are definitely going to be certain doctors who are more suited to this kind of model, and other doctors who aren't really maybe good at talking about certain things like that. But again, it's not necessarily that a doctor has to get to know a patient on a personal level, because also many patients might not want this. The whole idea is that the relationship should be this emerging sort of understanding from one another that is reciprocal. So if that means that the doctor doesn't want to do that and the patient doesn't want it done to them, then that's how it should be. So I think when we're talking about this relationship, that's what we mean is the perspective and the orientation. But we're also saying that sometimes that will manifest that a more holistic incorporation of the person's values and personal life will emerge.
Yeah, thanks. Because I was just thinking, if I went to a doctor and they're like, what do you want out of life? I'd be like, whoa, whoa, man.
Single
I didn't come here for that. Yeah. No, I don't really think that's what we're trying to say either. I think it's like, I have been to a doctor who's sort of been a little bit more friendly in terms of trying to understand me as an individual, and it's definitely hasn't been the norm in my experience, but when that's happened, I think they've gotten the right information to be able to understand me and my situation better. And I think it might also be sort of, it doesn't have to be an in-depth conversation like, what is your truth in life? But it could just be like maybe understanding, what does that person usually eat? Or, how often is that person getting up out of their desk? I don't know, some sort of less invasive bits of information that could contribute to the person's care plan.
I've got an example of this, and it may be TMI, so we can cut it if required. But I think a really good example of this is when I went to go on contraception, and the first point of call is the pill. If the doctor had literally taken the time to ask me, are you good at doing things at the same time every day? Like, are you an organized person? I would have been like, absolutely not. And they would have said, okay, well, you're not going on the pill because you need to take it within the same hour every day. I was on it for many years. I did not take it like once the same hour. I just forget. And the thing is each time you forget to take it within that hour, that your week of like being fertile starts again, so you can fall pregnant. And so if the doctor had just wanted to know a little bit more about my personality, and my habits, I could have been recommended an IUD much earlier, which is like you get it in once, forget about it, which was much more suited to my lifestyle. And so you're so right. If they had just asked a little bit more to draw more information out of me, they could have helped me make a much better healthcare choice way earlier on.
Thank you. I'm going to use that in my next paper.
Can I be co-author?
Yes. You earned it.
Thank you. But like the way I'm thinking about this is, and correct me if I'm phrasing this wrong in my head, it's not so much like Daoism is not so much telling doctors what to say, but it's like a behavioral guidance.
Yeah.
So, go through your methods, but be open. And so if this happens, then be open. And then if something else happens, then be open.
Yes.
It's more of like a how to get to the final product rather than what is the final product.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Beautiful.
How rather than what.
Great.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to go for, is an orientation and a perspective, and like you said, a behavioral sort of guidance. Yeah.
Excellent. No further questions.
Great. Man, my palms are sweaty.
This has been a high stress interview.
No, man, I'm zenned out.
That is the best use of that ever.
Podcasts, they're just like performing jazz.
Podcast title, is Daoism just jazz? Or is jazz Daoism?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Just saying something is something, then the opposite will.
I'm out, man. It's like 5 o'clock. Anyway, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the pod. I've learned a lot. I feel enlightened. I feel not quite zen. I feel a little confused.
Yeah, me too.
But okay.
Yeah.
I think Daoism would say that if you feel confused, you should just
Be
confused.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Actually, I would go as far as to say as, if you're confused, you're doing it right.
Ooh. Excellent. All right. Acceptance of confusion.
Yes. Yeah.
Not Confucius. Confusion.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our
It has been
pleasure.
awesome.
You're welcome anytime.
Pleasure. And to all listeners, if you're a doctor and you have a jazz band, let us know. Just because that'll be all. I got really fixated on this analogy, didn't I?
Skibbity bab, we out.
Can you do that again, but with a bit more?
No, next.
One day.
That was Alexa's famous chipmunk noise, everybody. Okay.
Just had to get that in there.
All right. Goodbye.
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 Thanks for listening to our new podcast. Subscribe online and tune in every first of the month. In the meantime, listen to CBME and you, and be savvy.